I remember the exact moment my life shattered. The morning of October 15th, 7:23 a.m. The smell of coffee in the kitchen, the quiet hum of my radio playing soft jazz, and the sunlight streaming through the blinds. That morning should have been ordinary, peaceful, the kind of morning a man with a life like mine expected to savor. But then, out of nowhere, the sound of sirens shattered everything. 6 police vehicles, flashing lights, and a chaos I couldn't comprehend. Across from Murphy's Diner, at Brody's auto shop, the place he had poured his heart, they were waiting. Not just waiting. They were attacking, storming the place like my son was some kind of criminal mastermind. My phone rang, and when I heard Brody's voice, shaking, terrified, it felt like someone had punched a hole straight through my chest. "Dad, they're saying I robbed an armored truck." My hands went cold. "Armed robbery," I whispered to myself, words tasting foreign and impossible. The Brody I knew, my son, the boy who cried for an hour after accidentally hitting a squirrel with his truck, the young man who spent his Saturdays teaching neighborhood kids how to change oil and check tire pressure for free, was now accused of something unthinkable. 2 days earlier, First National Bank's armored truck had been ambushed on Route 42. The guard, Jerome Watts, left bleeding, hospitalized for a week with a severe head injury. And somehow, my son's gloves were there. My gift to him for Christmas 2 years ago. The gloves, we joked, were magic hands because they fixed anything. Stolen from his shop 2 weeks prior. Brody told me at the jail, voice low, trembling. "Dad." I reported it. The break-in. October 1st. Someone took my tools, the gloves. The police report. It's gone. But gone doesn't cut it. Vanished, erased, like it never existed. And Detective Carl Brenner, a man I had treated his German shepherd, refused to even look me in the eye. "Evidence is evidence, Frank." "I'm sorry," he said. I drove away from that first visit, Marlene in the passenger seat. Her tears. Different. Sharp, calculated. "We need to face reality, Frank," she said, gripping the steering wheel. "Our son did this. The evidence. Overwhelming. He says he's innocent. Of course he does. What criminal admits guilt?" Her words weren't comforting. They were knives. That was the first crack, the first fracture in the perfect life we had built. My wife of 28 years, referring to our son as a lost cause before the trial had even begun, before we had even heard the evidence. I was too blind, too desperate, too terrified to notice. I was fighting for Brody, searching for the right lawyer, trying to save him, and I didn't realize. I had already lost Marlene. The betrayal, I would learn later, was so deep, so meticulously planned, it would haunt me for years. But the real devastation came months into Brody's sentence when he slipped me a napkin during visitation. 3 numbers, scribbled in a shaky hand, that would unravel a truth I wasn't sure I could survive discovering. You need to understand what we had before you can understand what was stolen from us. Millbrook, Indiana, population 8,000, sleepy Saturday mornings with the high school football games packing the stands, the diner serving pie made from scratch, Main Street lined with brick buildings that had seen generations of families grow, live, and die. Holloway Veterinary Clinic sat right in the heart of it, nestled between Morrison's Hardware and the bakery where Marlene bought fresh bread every Tuesday. I opened that clinic in 1994 with a loan from Marlene's father and a stubborn determination that bordered on madness. The first year nearly broke us. I remember Marlene at the kitchen table, round with our unborn child, sorting bills into piles labeled "Can't Pay" and "Wait a little longer." She never complained, not once. She rubbed her belly, smiled, and told me, "We're building something that matters." She had faith, and her faith carried me. Every early morning, every late night, every animal we saved, every family we helped, they all added up to something bigger. By the time Brody reached high school, I was treating livestock for half the county. Dairy cows, horses, sheep, every dog and cat within 50 miles. People came to me because they trusted me, because they knew I would get up at 3 a.m. if their mayor was falling, because I believed that kindness, effort, and integrity were more than words. They were actions. Brody grew up in that clinic. Homework sprawled across the back office desk, helping me soothe a skittish animal, learning that healing, whether of life or machinery, was noble work. But while I fixed animals, Brody fixed machines. By 16, he was already a mechanical prodigy, obsessed with every squeak, rattle, and hum of an engine. Every problem has a solution, he told me, covered in grease, eyes shining. You just have to listen. And listen he did. After high school, he worked at Thompson's Auto, learning the craft from Ray Thompson himself. When Ray retired, Brody borrowed a loan and bought the shop at 25. He painted the sign himself, Holloway Auto, while Marlene and I helped clean and organize. The shop became more than a business. It became Brody's pride, his calling, and the heart of the town's trust in him. He hired 3 men: Curtis Webb, just out of high school, Miguel Santos, a master mechanic from Chicago, and Dennis Farmer, a veteran of the trade. The shop thrived. Brody restored classic cars, honest work, fair prices, a reputation for solving problems others couldn't even diagnose. Sunday dinners at our house on Maple Avenue, the wraparound porch where Brody used to climb the oak tree, the golden retriever, Rusty, at our feet. These were the rhythms of a life I believed was unshakable. Marlene cooked pot roast. Brody brought craft beer. I poured the wine, and we watched the sun sink behind the cornfields, feeling like we had it all. "Complete," Marlene said one evening, pulling me close on the porch swing. "We have everything we need right here." And in that moment, I believed her. But life has a way of exposing the fragility in even the most complete-seeming worlds. 3 days later, Brody's life, and mine, was ripped apart. Arrested for a crime I couldn't fathom. The son I had watched grow from a bird-rescuing kid to a master mechanic was now a prisoner in an orange jumpsuit, ghostly pale, hands trembling, clutching the phone across plexiglass as I tried to reassure him, tried to fight the terror that had settled in my chest, and it was only the beginning. Every detail, every face, every moment leading to that point held pieces of the truth I hadn't yet understood. The gloves, the vanished police report, the unblinking eyes of Detective Brenner, Marlene's subtle shift in demeanor, the hints hidden in everyday conversations. They were all part of a puzzle that would reveal a betrayal so complete, so calculated that it would make me question not just my judgment, but the very foundation of my life. Brody, pale and shaking, looked at me through that barrier and whispered, almost too quietly for anyone to hear, "Dad, you'll understand soon." And he had no idea just how right he was. Those 3 numbers on the napkin, a simple scribble in fading ink, held the key to everything. The truth about the robbery, the betrayal, the life I thought I knew so well, it all hinged on those numbers. I tucked that napkin into my wallet, heart pounding because I knew that what I was holding wasn't just numbers. It was the map to a deeper, darker story that would change everything. For years, I had trusted the world to operate on fairness, on loyalty, on the bonds of family. And for years, I had been proven wrong. The town of Millbrook, the people I had saved, the animals I had healed, they had all seen one version of me. Frank Holloway, the devoted father, the dedicated vet, the man with integrity stitched into his very bones. But that version, that identity, would be tested, torn apart, and rebuilt in ways I could never have imagined. When I left the jail that day, Marlene's eyes avoided mine, her hand tight on the steering wheel. Her words, so calm, so calculated, replayed in my mind like a broken record. "We need to think about our future, Frank. We can't throw everything away on a lost cause." Lost cause. The phrase haunted me. She had already decided my son's fate before we had even begun to fight. She had already written our story for us, and I hadn't seen it. Not then, blinded by desperation and love, believing that loyalty could protect us. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, thinking about every early morning, every late night, every scraped knee, every lesson taught in the clinic, every car fixed in the auto shop, everything we had built. What if it all meant nothing? I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I barely moved. And yet, somewhere in the darkness, a sliver of determination burned. Because if my son was innocent, If he was being framed, I would find the truth. I would pull back every veil, turn over every stone, expose every lie, and I would do it, no matter what it cost me. I had already lost everything else, my savings, my marriage, my faith in justice. But Brody, my son, I wasn't about to lose him too. And as I held that napkin in my hands, feeling the rough texture of the paper and the faint imprint of his handwriting, I knew that the next steps I took would not just determine Brody's fate, they would determine the very essence of who I was, who I could be, and whether justice could ever truly be found in a world that had already betrayed me so completely. The night stretched long, the house silent except for the tick of the clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Memories of better days flickered through my mind like an old film reel. Brody laughing as he fixed the old Mustang, Marlene carefully measuring ingredients for a new pie recipe, Rusty chasing a squirrel across the yard, me gently soothing a frightened calf back to its mother. Those images, warm and familiar, felt both comforting and agonizing. They reminded me of what had been taken, what had been shattered, and they reminded me why I couldn't give up. Because the truth, the real truth, was out there, and it was waiting for me, hidden in plain sight, buried beneath layers of lies, deceit, and betrayal. And I was going to find it. The 3 numbers on that napkin were just the beginning. They were a key, a spark, a clue. And what they unlocked, well, that was something that would change everything I thought I knew about my son, my wife, and the life we had all believed we had built together. I just didn't know it yet. The road ahead was dark, winding and full of dangers I couldn't see. Every step I took would bring me closer to a truth that some people wanted buried forever. And some of those people were closer to me than I could have ever imagined. Those numbers. They were about to show me everything, and what I saw next would leave me questioning not just my life, but my very existence. Dad, I swear on Grandma's grave, I didn't do this. Brody's voice cracked, raw and urgent, cutting through the sterile hum of the prison visiting room. I was at the shop all morning. Ask Miguel. Ask Curtis. Ask Dennis. They were all there. We were working on 3 different cars. I didn't hesitate. I believed him instantly. Not because he was my son. Not because I wanted to believe. I knew that voice. That same voice had carried him through every impossible claim of innocence in his life. 7 years old, swearing he hadn't broken the kitchen window even as the neighbor kid's baseball lay in the yard. 16, insisting he hadn't touched a drop at the Johnsons' party. Brody could not lie to save his life. His eyes always gave him away, and now, staring at me through the scratched plexiglass, those eyes held nothing but desperate, pure truth. But truth doesn't always win. Evidence is evidence. And the prosecution's case? They laid it out like a blueprint for conviction. Gloves with Brody's initials found next to a bleeding guard. A looming $50,000 equipment loan due in 2 weeks. Security footage from the bank showing someone roughly Brody's height and build, face obscured by a mask. And the worst part, Brody had no alibi for the exact hour of the robbery. He explained frantically, voice tight with frustration and fear. Dad, the guys were on a parts run. I sent them to pick up supplies from Fort Wayne. I was alone at the shop for maybe 90 minutes. And surely there's security footage from your shop, I asked, hope flickering. The cameras went down that morning. Power surge or something. I called the security company. They couldn't come out until the next day. Every excuse sounded like desperation. Every misstep, coincidence, or technical failure stacked like bricks against him. Even I, who knew him better than anyone, could see how damning it looked. We called Gerald Ashford, a defense attorney from Indianapolis, a man who came highly recommended with a reputation for winning cases nobody else could. Marlene had found him through her cousin, a paralegal in the city. Gerald was a giant of a man, 6'3" with silver hair, a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He spread out the evidence across our coffee table like a war map. Each photo, document, and report a strike against my son. The prosecution's case is strong, Gerald said, calm and unflinching. They have physical evidence, motive, and opportunity. Your son is looking at 25 to life if convicted. Armed robbery with injury to a guard. Serious time, but he's innocent, I said. My voice cracked under the weight of certainty and fear. Gerald smiled. Patient. Practiced. Innocence and reasonable doubt are two very different things. We'll argue it, but this won't be cheap. Retainer is $100,000. Trial could run another $200,000, maybe more if we need expert witnesses. Marlene gasped. Frank, that's our entire retirement. I looked at her, searching for the determination that had carried us through every challenge of 30 years together. Instead, I saw something else, calculation. She was weighing costs and benefits. Maybe we should consider a plea deal, she said quietly. Plea deal? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was Brody, my son, my boy, and she was talking about giving him away like a commodity, like life and freedom were negotiable items. I know who it is, Frank. Her voice went cold. And I also know that throwing away our entire future won't change the evidence. That night, our marriage fractured. Not in the trivial ways, the little squabbles over money or chores, but in fundamental ideology. What did family mean? What did loyalty mean? How far would one go for the people they loved most? I spent the next morning liquidating everything. Retirement accounts, savings bonds, life insurance. Even the clinic sold to my junior partner for 70% of its value. Fast money, fast decisions. I was desperate to keep my son from prison, to buy time, to fight a battle that already felt like a war I couldn't win. Marlene screamed when I sold her mother's heirloom jewelry. The words she spat like venom, slicing through the walls of our home. The evidence is overwhelming. Our son is guilty and you're too blind to see it. What if you're wrong? I asked quietly, voice tight with fear. What if our boy is telling the truth? Then God help us all, she whispered, eyes hollow with resignation. But I can't watch you throw away 30 years of our life on a fantasy. The trial lasted 3 grueling months. Each day, I watched jurors' faces harden as Gerald fumbled through basic procedural moves, failing to challenge evidence, neglecting witnesses who could have cleared my son. Curtis, Miguel, and Dennis all testified, but under cross-examination their stories faltered. Small inconsistencies, tiny cracks, enough to create doubt, enough for the prosecution to exploit. The verdict came. Guilty. Brody didn't cry. He looked at me through the plexiglass, lips barely moving. I'm sorry, Dad. Marlene left that night. No goodbye. No explanation. Divorce papers left on the kitchen table. A note burning itself into my memory. You chose a criminal over our future. I choose myself over your delusion. 6 months into Brody's sentence at Westville Correctional, I existed in a shadow of my former life. 1-bedroom apartment above Hendrick's Hardware, smelling of oil and old wood, the radiator clanging like a giant hand on the pipes. I took a job at a pet supply warehouse for $12 an hour, enough for gas to see my son and food on the table. The house on Maple Avenue, the one where we had raised our son, celebrated 30 Christmases, carried Marlene over the threshold as newlyweds. It was gone. She got it. She also got half of nothing because I had already spent everything on Brody's defense. All I had left was my truck and a photo album she didn't want, filled with pictures of a life that now felt like a lie. Every Saturday, I drove 2 hours to Westville, sat in the visiting room, talking to my son through scratched plexiglass. Conversations were everything except the case. The weather, baseball, how Miguel kept the shop running, how Mrs. Dalton still asked about the Mustang Brody was restoring. 24 years, 7 months to go, Dad, Brody would joke, but his eyes were hollow, prison eroding something vital inside him day by day. This visit felt different. From the moment I walked in, Brody was restless, glancing over his shoulder, studying guards, other visitors. His leg bounced under the table, a nervous habit from childhood resurfacing when something was very wrong. Dad, I need you to listen carefully, he said, leaning close to the glass. His voice was low, urgent. Don't react to what I'm about to do. Just put it in your pocket. He pulled out a napkin. Thin, brown, crumpled from handling. He slid it across the ledge beneath the partition. I palmed it like he had taught me to palm cards when I was trying to learn magic tricks to entertain him as a child. "There's something at Union Station downtown," he whispered. "Locker 447, the keys, taped under the bench at Riverside Park. You remember the spot, right? Where you taught me to fish." I remembered. That wooden bench, carved initials, countless Saturdays with fishing poles, pretending to catch bluegill, talking about life while the sun slid behind the horizon. Brody's words came fast and quiet. "Dad, after you see what's in that locker, you'll understand everything. The robbery, the trial, why Mom really left. Everything." A guard approached our table, footsteps echoing, a harsh reminder of the walls, bars, and eyes everywhere. I slid the napkin into my pocket, heart hammering, a mix of dread and hope swirling in my chest. I had no idea what I was about to find, but I knew this. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my son, my wife, was about to be turned upside down. And as I left the visiting room that day, napkin burning in my pocket, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real story, the one behind lies, betrayal, and a son's desperate innocence, was just beginning. The locker, the keys, the location only Brody could have known. It was all part of a puzzle that would either save him or destroy what little life I had left. And what I discovered when I finally got there would change everything. The air was heavy with anticipation, the kind that makes every hair on your arms stand on end. This wasn't just a search for truth anymore. This was a reckoning that would leave me questioning everything I believed about justice, family, and the people I thought I could trust most. The napkin, the locker, the secret waiting beneath a city I thought I knew. Everything hinged on the next move I made, and there was no turning back. "Time's up, Holloway." Thompson's voice cut through the air like a crowbar hitting concrete. His badge glinted in the harsh fluorescent light, built like a linebacker, a face so imposing that the hint of a smile felt like it could break bones. I froze for a heartbeat. Then Brody stood quickly, but before I could turn away, he grabbed my wrist through the tiny opening in the plexiglass. His grip was desperate, strong in a way that made my heart wrench. "Dad, after you see what's in there, promise me you'll be careful," he whispered, urgency threading every word. "The people involved in this, they've already destroyed our family. Don't let them destroy you, too. And whatever you do, trust no one. Not the lawyers. Not the cops, nobody, especially not anyone from the case." The guard yanked Brody back. "Time's up." He looked back one last time, and what I saw seared itself into my memory forever. Not fear, not exactly. It was something more complicated. A grim determination mixed with fragile hope, like a drowning man finally seeing the shore. That look stayed with me long after they led him away. I sat in my truck in the prison parking lot for over an hour, the napkin burning a hole in my pocket. My fingers trembled as I finally unfolded it. 3 simple numbers were scrawled in pencil. 447. Below them, in tiny handwriting that I immediately recognized, Brody had written, "The truth always finds a way." That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his voice pleading for me to act, to move carefully, to unravel the web he was trapped in. By 3 a.m., I had given up on rest entirely. I grabbed my coat and drove the 2 hours to Riverside Park. The park was silent, deserted, lit by a single flickering street lamp that cast long, trembling shadows across the empty paths. The bench was exactly as I remembered it. Weathered, splintering, the initials Brody and I had carved so long ago still faintly visible. I ran my fingers along the underside until my hand hit something solid. My pulse spiked, a small brass key taped with what felt like half a roll of duct tape. My hands shook as I peeled it free, adrenaline coursing through me. Brody had risked everything to make sure I had this, to make sure I could uncover the truth. The cold metal in my hand felt heavier than any weapon. I knew, in that moment, my life was about to change again. By 6 a.m., Union Station was like a cathedral before service. Vast, echoing, empty, the silence so complete it demanded reverence. I moved quietly through the main terminal, past shuttered shops and rows of empty benches, following signs to the locker area. My footsteps echoed off the marble floors, announcing my presence to nobody. Locker 4427 sat tucked away in a back corner behind the old, long-abandoned shoeshine stand. At first glance, it looked like any other locker in the station, unremarkable. But I knew differently. This small metal box could hold the answer to everything. The key slid in easily. I turned it. Click. The sound reverberated like a gunshot in the empty station. Inside, a large manila envelope and a portable hard drive stared back at me. I sat on a nearby bench, hands trembling, heart hammering as if it wanted to escape my chest. I opened the envelope first. The top document made my knees buckle. A bank statement. Marlene's name at the top. Not our joint account, but another separate account opened 3 years ago at First National. The same bank that had been robbed. The same bank where Jennifer, Brody's girlfriend, worked. Deposits were small at first. $500 here, $1,000 there, but 6 months before the robbery, someone had deposited $400,000. The deposit slip was attached. The signature, unmistakably Marlene's. But the source of funds line read, Investment Return, Ashford Holdings. Ashford. Gerald Ashford, our defense attorney. The person I had trusted to save Brody. The betrayal was already sharper than any pain I had ever known. Then came the next document. Screenshots of text messages between Marlene and Gerald 8 months before the robbery. Marine, is everything in place? Gerald, the gloves are planted. Make sure Brody's alone at the shop tomorrow morning. Marine, what about Frank? Gerald, he'll pay me to lose the case. You get the insurance money from the divorce. I get my fees, we split what's left from the truck. Marlene and Brody, Gerald, 25 years minimum. By the time he gets out, we'll be long gone. My vision blurred. I read it 3 times before my brain could process it. My wife, our lawyer. They had framed our son. Every detail orchestrated, executed with the precision of a Swiss watch. The hard drive was worse. I plugged it into my laptop right there in the empty station, ignoring the potential witnesses and cameras. The first file, security footage from a traffic camera 2 blocks from Brody's shop. Timestamp, the morning of the robbery. Brody's truck parked in its usual spot, unmoving, untouched. Everything the prosecution had said about him being absent, being guilty, every coincidence and alibi gap, all lies. Next folder, photos. Gerald Ashford at the robbery scene 20 minutes before the police arrived. Another, him shaking hands with Jerome Watts, the guard, outside a bar 2 weeks before the robbery. Watts accepting an envelope. The implications were clear and staggering. Then an audio file. Marlene's voice, clear as day, coaching someone on exactly what to say. Curtis, you need to say you were gone for 2 hours, not 1. Brody was alone. It's important, Curtis Webb's nervous voice responded. Mrs. Holloway, I don't feel right about this. $50,000, Curtis. Enough to start fresh somewhere far away. Or I can make sure everyone knows about your past. Your drug arrest in Indianapolis. Remember that? My hands shook as I hit the next file. Video footage from Brody's shop, 3 weeks before his arrest. Brody alone, talking to a hidden camera he must have installed himself. He looked directly into the lens, a mix of determination and fear in his eyes. If something happens to me, he said, voice steady but urgent, you'll know what to do. You have to find the truth, Dad. No one else can. Not the cops. Not the lawyers. Not even me. I sank into the bench, my chest heaving. Every betrayal, every lie, every falsehood that had twisted my life into chaos was revealed here. My son, the boy who could not lie, had set up the only lifeline we had. He had trusted me to follow the trail he laid, to expose the corruption that had shattered our family. And yet, as terrifying as the evidence was, as overwhelming as the reality felt, there was a spark, A tiny, stubborn, unbreakable spark of hope. Brody had planned for every possibility. He had foreseen the betrayal, the framing, the prison sentence. He had given me the tools, the napkin, the key, the locker, to reclaim the truth, to fight back. I looked at the hard drive, at the envelope, at the key in my hand. My life, my son's life, everything we had lost had led to this moment. And in that moment, one truth became crystal clear. The people we trusted most were the ones who had betrayed us the deepest. Marlene. Gerald Ashford. All of them. The conspiracy was bigger than I could have imagined. And if I wasn't careful, it wouldn't just destroy Brody. It could destroy me, too. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Every step from here on out would be a dance on a razor's edge. One wrong move, one glance in the wrong direction, and everything would come crashing down. But I had to act. For Brody, for the truth, for the life that had been stolen from us. And as I slid the key into my pocket, the envelope and hard drive cradled in my arms, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Nothing would ever be the same. Not our family, not our town, not the lives of those who thought they could manipulate us. The reckoning had begun. And the next step would take me closer to the truth than I had ever dared to imagine. Dad. Check Mom's phone records. Brody's voice trembled through the static of the old video he'd recorded. From prison, his face pale but determined, eyes locking with the camera as if trying to reach me directly through the glass and wires. She's been asking strange questions about the shop's insurance policies, about my schedule when I'm alone. The words hit me like a freight train. Every instinct I'd had over the past months, the unease, the suspicion, the gnawing, feeling that something was deeply, horribly wrong, was suddenly crystallized. Brody continued, his tone urgent, measured, but laced with fear. She had a meeting with Gerald Ashford last week. She said it was about updating the will, but Gerald, he's a criminal defense attorney, not an estate planner. I found a burner phone in her car with only one number in it. His eyes bore into the camera. I'm documenting this because I don't know who to trust anymore. Dad, if you're watching this, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I kept hoping I was wrong about Mom. I kept hoping I was paranoid. The video ended with Brody looking directly into the lens, the urgency in his gaze burning into my soul. I'm going to hide this drive, he said, and make sure someone knows where to find it if anything happens to me. Curtis knows where it is. Despite everything, he's a good kid, just scared and over his head. I sat there in that empty station for an hour, staring at the evidence spread across my laptop screen. The betrayal was absolute. My wife of 30 years, Marlene, the woman I had built my life with, the mother of my child, the partner I had trusted implicitly, had sacrificed our son for money. She had watched me destroy myself, spent everything I had to fight for Brody, all while knowing the truth. She hadn't left me because she thought I had chosen a criminal over our future. No, she had left because her part in the plan was done, and she needed to distance herself from the aftermath. Cold, calculating, merciless. I didn't stop to breathe, didn't go home. I drove straight to the FBI field office in Indianapolis. No calls, no warnings, just me and the evidence, raw and unfiltered, laid out on the desk in front of Special Agent Diana Rodriguez. Her eyes were dark, piercing, scanning each document like a predator assessing prey. When I showed her the video of Brody explaining everything he had uncovered, her expression shifted, calculating the magnitude of what we were dealing with. This, she said slowly, almost reverently, is one of the most elaborate frame jobs I've seen in 20 years. She pulled out her phone, dialing quickly. We're going to need you to stay here while we verify everything and get warrants. Within 48 hours, the walls of deception started crumbling. Marlene was arrested at her sister's house in Chicago, living under her maiden name, trying to vanish from the consequences she had orchestrated. Gerald Ashford, our defense attorney, was cuffed in his office while his secretary watched in stunned silence. Curtis Webb, trembling with guilt and fear, broke down completely, spilling everything to investigators in minutes. He admitted that Mrs. Holloway had known about his past, had leveraged it to manipulate him, to fabricate Brody's absence during the robbery. She had promised him $50,000 if he complied, and threatened to destroy him if he didn't. Curtis confessed. He had been dying inside, knowing Brody was locked up because of the lies he had been forced to tell. Then came Jerome Watts, the supposedly injured guard. He admitted that Gerald had paid him $100,000 to take a deliberate fall, stage an injury, and identify Brody in a lineup, despite never having seen the robbers. The head injury? Carefully, calculated to look severe, but no permanent damage had been done. The FBI's investigation recovered the missing $2.3 million within a week, all funneled into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands under Marlene and Gerald's names. They had planned to leave the country once Brody's appeals were exhausted, and I had lost all hope. The evidence was damning, irrefutable, absolute. Marlene's confession came on the third day of federal custody. No tears, no apologies, just cold, precise facts, delivered in the same tone she once used to discuss grocery lists. I wanted more, she said, her voice devoid of emotion, echoing in the small observation room as I watched from behind one-way glass. 30 years of looking after sick animals, living in the same house, eating at the same diner every Friday night. I wanted more. I deserved more. Gerald showed me how to get it, even if it meant destroying your son. I remember feeling a cold rage simmer beneath the skin, a surreal detachment as I watched the woman I once loved speak with such calculated cruelty. Brody was collateral damage, she continued. He would have wasted his whole life in that shop anyway. At least this way, his existence served a purpose. 6 weeks later, I stood outside Westville Correctional as the gates slowly creaked open. The February wind cut through my coat, but I barely noticed it. Brody emerged, carrying a simple paper bag with his belongings, and for the first time in nearly a year, I saw him truly free. He looked thinner, older around the eyes, but his smile, small, hesitant but genuine, lit up the bleak morning like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "How did you know about the locker, son?" I asked, embracing him tighter than I had since he was a child. Brody explained as we walked to my truck, his voice quiet but steady. Curtis had told him everything, the hidden evidence, the backup plans, even the Union Station locker. Brody had been too afraid to retrieve it himself, but he had trusted me to act. His conscience had been gnawing at him every day behind bars, knowing he was powerless to correct the wrongs inflicted upon him. As we drove away from the prison, I thought of the house on Maple Avenue, now sold to cover legal fees. The clinic I had built from nothing, now in someone else's hands. The retirement accounts emptied, the savings bonds cashed, 30 years of my life all gone. And yet, as I looked at my son, free and vindicated, I realized I hadn't lost anything that truly mattered. His freedom, his faith in me, my faith in him, those were priceless. "Come on," I said, a grin tugging at my face despite everything. "Let's go home." The drive back to Millbrook was quiet, comfortable. As we passed the veterinary clinic, a new sign caught my eye. "Welcome back, Doc Holloway. Job waiting whenever you're ready." Dr. Walsh had added it that morning, the gesture small but meaningful, and Brody smiled. The first real smile in so long. "Small towns don't forget good people, Dad." "No," I agreed silently. "They also don't forget the bad ones." Already, the community had rallied to help Brody reopen his shop, donations pouring in from everyone who had ever known his integrity, his skill, his heart. That night, in my small apartment above the hardware store, we shared a simple dinner. Spaghetti, garlic bread, no pot roast, no fancy table, no pretense. And yet, for the first time in months, there was something richer than any meal could offer. Truth, trust, the unbreakable bond between a father who never stopped believing and a son who never stopped hoping. 3 months later, Brody's shop reopened. A loan from the community bank, donations from neighbors and clients, and Brody's relentless determination breathed life back into the place he had built with his own hands. I returned to veterinary practice, part-time, rebuilding my client base with Dr. Walsh's help, slowly reclaiming a life interrupted but not destroyed. Every Sunday, Brody and I sit down to dinner, just the two of us. We don't speak of Marlene, serving 15 years in federal prison, or Gerald, who got 20. Instead, we talk about the future, the garage Brody is expanding, the golden retriever puppy I'm training, and Jennifer, who never left Brody's side and now wears his engagement ring. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what really matters. A son's freedom, a bond forged in adversity, faith restored. These are the things money cannot buy, cannot destroy, cannot steal, and in the end, the truth always finds a way. Every lie, every betrayal, every dark corner of deception can be illuminated if you have the courage to follow it. Brody and I learned this the hard way, but now, finally, our lives are ours again, rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, love, and the unshakable connection between a father and his son. And as we look forward, as the sun sets behind Millbrook's familiar skyline, there's only one thing left to do. Move ahead, together, with every lesson learned etched into our hearts, and the certainty that even in the darkest night, the truth will always find a way.